Good morning. Today I wanted to share with you a very personal story, and hopefully this will be a reflection for some of our teachers in the field of teaching. So I had a nightmare a couple of days ago, and in that nightmare, it's unique and different compared to other nightmares. Usually people, they have a nightmare and involves violence, sometimes even somebody dying and somebody getting hurt. And some of them, they wake up screaming and, with fast heartbeat. And, it depends on what type of nightmare they had. Mine was very different. I woke up definitely in shock, and really kind of like, upset, and the emotions were mixed. And it had nothing to do with violence. It was a dream of me being assessed based on an assignment that was given to me. And I was old, I was not very young, but the person who actually got to assess my assignment was my primary school teacher, and she failed me. And some people may say, how is that terrifying? Sometimes people have these nightmares, not so much because of the facts of the story, but more of like the emotions are attached to it and the history behind it. Growing up in Algeria, I had a primary teacher, and in Algeria, your teacher will continue with you throughout the primary school from first grade all the way to sixth grade. That's where actually the primary school for us stops before you go into middle school. And this teacher, back in the days in Algeria, and still to an extent, probably even now, I left Algeria when I was 13, so I'm not sure of how the situation is now. Even if the teacher is known to be at fault, but no one speaks up, really. Like you don't have the right. Who are you going to complain to? So we kind of like, we pray, we always pray that, the kids don't find themselves dealing with a teacher who's being unfair. So now my experience, this teacher, we knew that she had her pets, her favorite student, and it was known to us also why actually that student was her favorite, and it was because of the position that the father of that child held as a director of a post office. And for us back in the days, a post office, when you go to the post office, you can do a lot of things. It's not just for sending letters. A lot of transactions, government transactions take place there. So we knew that student, that specific student was always placing first. I was not among the failing ones. I was actually always among the top 10, like 7, 6, around that range. But I knew that's not what actually I'm supposed to be at. I knew that actually I was supposed to be in a better place, but I couldn't do anything about it. Definitely hated the teacher. Definitely hated every single day that I was going to the school, and every day that I was actually sitting and knowing that she was either going to pick on me or like it was not a pleasant experience, the least to say about it. So I continued for 6 years going through that. And actually, one of the things that I used to do when I was younger, I used to write in very small handwriting. And at my age, I kind of convinced myself that, when I write in small handwriting, she actually would not be able to read it. But I remember she was calling me out like all the time, like, and kind of like making these comments. And so let's say, I had the worst experience with her as a teacher. And we had what we call like, here it's not a national test, it's like state test, you could think of it. Like towards the end of that, elementary school, that sixth grade, everyone sits for a test. And I sat for the test, and that was the only test throughout my elementary school experience, the only test that was not going to be graded by her. It was actually graded by other teachers. Just like, again, here in New York State, when the students sit for New York State tests or the regions, typically we choose to have other teachers grade it, a lot of times from different schools. So that's exactly what happened for me. And because of that, now that is a test that people really, like parents, like people actually have parties for their kids when they pass. I placed second in my class in that test. And that made me hate her even more because I knew my potential, but I knew also that she was the only obstacle in my life from really getting where I needed to get. And the funny thing, one of my siblings, when I graduated, now when she finishes up to 6th grade, she will restart, meaning she's going to get the new batch of students going into elementary school. My brother was one of them. And I had a very unique experience with that. So my father took me with him. And so what they do, they line you up, all the kids, and they start calling the kids by their first and last name, and they say, go to this teacher, go to that teacher, right? This is for 1st grade students. And they called my brother. Now they messed up his last name a little bit. And they said he has to go with her. And I was like, nope. And I was a 6th grader. I was like, I'm going to protect my brother. Now, of course, I was still young. At the end, he ended up in her class. In that moment, my father had to go somewhere. For some reason, he had to step away as they were calling the names. But he told me, he said, listen for your brother's name and for the teacher's name. So once they call your brother, just send him to the class that he needs to go to. And I remember it was... everyone was gone. Literally every single student was already placed with a teacher. And I was standing outside with my brother, just the two of us. And then my father came back and he said, what happened? And I told him, I said, well, they didn't call his name and we don't know where he's supposed to be going. Mind you, I knew where he was supposed to be going. So he went to the principal and the principal said, yeah, he's actually with that teacher. And the principal's like, yeah, and that's also, Sohaib's teacher. He should have known, who the teacher is. And I was like, oh, because, they messed up the last name. That's why I couldn't figure it out. So this is how much hate I had for her. Now, I just want to give the teachers the feeling of how someone, it's because a lot of times we try to find excuses this student's not doing well, that student's not doing well. That's why, they're kind of pushed aside. That is not an excuse, but just to give you a feel. My experience with her was really bad. Now, fast forward, I went to middle school. I was actually among the top students in my classes. I got to a point where in some classes, they would not even grade my paper. They would give me a full grade. Myself and there was another guy and 2 girls. So yes, I pulled out. Yes, I managed to do well academically after that, but that nightmare that I had a couple of days ago is just a reminder of the impact that every teacher could have on the students. Now, not every student ends up with this experience that I had, maybe because my mother was always pushing for education, but I know a lot of people actually drop out of school, especially back in the days where the government wasn't so involved in making sure that every child, stays in school. Some kids actually drop out of school because of the treatment they receive. One of my cousins, much younger than me, she actually, her parents pulled her out because she was traumatized because of the experience she had with the teacher from day one. She slapped her. Now, I used to get hit by the teacher left and right. And I think because in my culture, it was acceptable. So that was not the biggest issue, but just I think the mental and psychological toll that it took on me by the way she was treating me and others. I was not the only one. I hated her guts. I just hated the fact that she was my teacher. And I know, actually, I still have friends who share the same feeling. And it's really sad to actually be an educator myself, yet still fight with that feeling of kind of now, do I hate her now as a person? I don't. I have nothing against her as a person now. But I know and I do recognize the hate that I had for her in the past. And it's very sad to really even talk about it. And as a grown-up man who's a teacher myself, to actually have a nightmare because of a teacher from my past, it's devastating. So this message goes to each and every teacher, and I'm actually going to conclude with this part. Fast forward, like I mentioned, in my middle school, I had a language teacher, an Arabic teacher. Now, for some reason, even though Algeria is an Arab country, but most students did not do well in Arabic. And we had a teacher who made me not just excel in Arabic. Growing up, I was a science person. Give me science, biology, math, physics. I really loved those subjects. I was doing extremely well in them. Like I mentioned, they would not even grade my paper. Arabic, because I had that experience with my previous teacher, kind of like was not really loving it. I was doing well. I was not struggling, but I wasn't doing really well. But then I had this teacher. He was a guy. Because, a lot of times also they say, oh, it's the woman who really gets the emotions and feels her students and guys are dry. No, this guy was an amazing teacher, that he made me not just love Arabic as a language, but he actually made me love poetry. And I even ended up writing. I have taken a long break. And the way he was teaching, the way that he loved the class, the subject, the way that he really made each and every one of us feel that we are important. I remember I didn't used to get allowance, like our celebrations, like Eids, like this, where we get the money. I saved money, knowing that he was not going to be my teacher for every single year. That's what happens in middle school. You don't always get the same teacher. I went and I made sure I buy him a gift. Like, that's how much I really loved his class and loved him as a teacher. And I still have the love to this day for Arabic poetry. Did not have that love before, but I had it because of that one teacher. And I had him only for 1 year, one single year. So it doesn't matter what you're teaching. The goal is not really to have your students love the subject that you're teaching all the time, but just the fact that you give them a positive experience with someone who is molding and shaping them as the future leaders of our society. It doesn't matter what country you're from. Please make sure that you do take teaching to heart. And as you're teaching, remember, you're touching people's hearts and minds. So make sure that you do it in a very positive way, and you don't do it in a very negative way. May God bless all the teachers, and may He continue to use you in the best way possible. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.